Q Tykel says, "Hi Xisuma, thanks for the sensible and well thought out conversation. It's always a pleasure to listen to your streams. You are more real than other streamers I watch. Are you listening to any interesting podcasts at the moment?" A couple of things you said there that are interesting. I mean, being more real or not, one thing I will say is like, when I stream, the way I am on a stream is so different to what I'm like in real life. Like doing a stream is like a zone. It's not like I'm not me, but it's like you go into a space where you can behave and be in a particular way. So all the things that I express, they're me, but like IRL interactions, it's like not the same. And that's like totally, I think totally normal. It's just something you want to make people aware of, that like being in this environment allows you to behave in a certain way or express yourself in a certain way. As for interesting podcasts, all right, I listened to one about free will again, and I love the argument this guy makes about free will. Okay, so like this podcast I was listening to was about free will and making an argument that free will is essentially an illusion of some form. It doesn't really exist, right? When you discuss this, people are usually quick to disagree, and maybe rightly so. Like, it's a very unintuitive thing to try and explain to someone the idea of not having free will. But I love the arguments this guy makes. They're so clever. So the argument was like to say, think of a movie, right? You say to someone that they should try and think of a movie. So everyone here can do that right now. You can think of a movie. You know, chances are, right, think about this, chances are you're going to think of a movie, okay, because you've all just thought of one probably. You're going to think of, first of all, a movie that you probably like, okay? Probably a movie that you like. This isn't, by the way, this isn't the exact same argument that they're making. I'm just probably butchering it a little bit. But you're very likely to think of a movie that you like or something that is recent in your memory. Yet, there is a plethora of movies that we all know about. And the one the guy used in the podcast was The Wizard of Oz, right? So the example was like, you didn't think of The Wizard of Oz, yet everyone here knows the movie The Wizard of Oz, right? So if you are now in chat and you know the movie The Wizard of Oz, but you didn't think of it, right? What does that mean? Let's get a show of hands. You know the movie The Wizard of Oz, but it never came to mind when I asked you to pick a movie. Never watched it, says Floyd, but you know what it is. You know what it is, right? It's a very well-known movie if you've seen it or not. It's just one of those cultural things. You grow up, you find out about The Wizard of Oz. So most people in chat are saying, yeah, know what The Wizard of Oz is, right? And it didn't come to mind. So I'll give you another shot at, picking a movie, any movie. And the chances are I can then pull up the name of another famous one that didn't come to mind. There are a lot of movies, right? There's a lot to know of and remember, and you tend to remember the better ones more than the bad ones. I could say Forrest Gump. And for some of you, Forrest Gump is actually probably on your favourite list and one that would come up when you get asked a question like that, right? Or maybe one of these Marvel movies, because lots of people are into that. Then what you have to realise is that you doing the action of picking something and thinking about it is influenced by mechanics and forces that you're sort of not aware of, like memory. You don't kind of think of your free will being attached to memory. Like, why is it that you couldn't actually think of every single movie possible that you have ever seen and then pick one? So anything I would have said, any type of movie at all, you would have been like, yeah, I thought about that, but I picked a different one. And that's because you're limited, you're constrained by how much you can sort of remember at any one point. So if you have free will, your free will is constrained by memory, let's say. It has to be. Because you can't just pull something, completely abstract out of there. So this really highlights the fact that there is mechanics at work in your mind that is pulling up certain bits of information for you. Average Martin says it's because we can't access 100% of our brain. Yeah, but saying it like that kind of gives you this impression that you're like a hand reaching in looking for something and the walls move. So you're still on the realm of having free will. I look at it more like the brain is the thing bringing you thoughts. It's moving around and feeding information to the conscious experience, right? So things are popping up and coming. And the reason that I look at it like that is because I do meditation. And when you meditate, you are trying to focus on the present, pay attention to the bodily senses, and observe thoughts. And when you try to do that, thoughts constantly come into your head, and it can be almost irritating unless you approach it in the right way. These thoughts come into your head, and you are like, no, I'm not trying to do that right now. And it makes you think, where are these thoughts coming from? For me, a lot of my thoughts are planning ahead. It's like my brain is trying to actively plan the rest of my day. You got to do this. After you're meditating, you're doing that. Don't forget to do this thing, right? It's kind of like a constant entourage, and you got to like fight it and try and stay focused on this idea that you're just trying to pay attention to the sensory input. And when you do that, you also have zero control over the sensory input. You have no control over the things that you're hearing, the things that you're feeling. They are just coming to you through the conscious experience. So we can probably all understand the idea of maybe free will isn't a thing when you hear a sound in your noise because someone else made it, like I'm making sounds in your eardrum right now. We can all understand that, but then when it comes to like thoughts, when you're in the environment of actively, trying to not think, to be present and pay attention to your sensory inputs, that's when it becomes really obvious that you're not as in control over your thoughts as you think you might be. And your thoughts tend to be the thing that make you feel like you have free will. So, you make decisions about whatever things are popping into your mind. But that's the point. The source of those thoughts, the source of things that become apparent to you, that's your brain. And I think you can look at them as if they're like evolutionary instincts that have built up over the evolution of the brain over time. That's why planning makes a lot of sense. Thinking ahead. What is the act of thinking ahead? You also tend to think backwards as well and reflect on things in the past. And these are all just constantly arising in the present moment. And if you try and meditate, everyone should give it a little go, right? Don't expect to like meditate and have a transcending experience, but like meditate for a bit and try and notice how you will get caught in a train of thought and it's hard to go back out of the thoughts, and how your thoughts kind of take over your current moment in time. Lightning Will says you're scaring me. This is nothing to be scared by. I think it's something to be embraced. Once you start to look at your mind working that way, for me, it gives me a little bit more power and thought over what I'm doing. Just understanding that thoughts are arising into consciousness kind of makes me think about them differently, and this is where it's a bit of a leap to try and describe like why that's positive, but it kind of makes me feel empowered in a weird way, the idea that free will is an illusion, because then I look at things in a weird way being out of my control, but in embracing the illusion and realizing that's the way things work, it allows me to think differently and make smarter decisions. So when you start to look at it like, okay, I didn't choose to be born as this person, right? That was not a choice that I made. And I didn't choose some of the events and things that happened to me along the way, yet they formed who I am. It feels like I'm better able to steer myself in the direction of things that are going to change and influence me, and then make sure that they're there for the positive and for the better. So, I kind of don't believe in free will, yet I sort of in a weird way act as if I am. Because sometimes I think people think if you don't believe in free will, it's like, why bother, why do anything, nothing matters. That's not it at all. It's just understanding the nature of experiencing reality and the sort of perception. If you can understand like what's happening inside of your brain, how thoughts are arising, it can make you rethink your relation with them and then turn them towards something that is more positive. That's how I look at it. Cozy26 says, I don't think we have free will. That's because our subconscious and our instincts act on their own, and there is nothing we can consciously do about it. We can control things we think, hear, see, touch, etc. if we try, but our subconscious and instincts both always going to work as efficiently, and the last bit got cut off. I need a pause button for reading my stream, right? I have ADHD and anxiety, so it's kind of hard to meditate. Free will seems more not outside of our control, but impacted by outside sources. Personally, and the way I grew up also plays a part if you have a choice which source you get information from. One thing I would say about having anxiety is meditation can be a tool to help you with anxiety, because one thing you can do if you feel anxious is try to meditate. Now, that sounds a little strange, but one of the things you will then have to do is sit with your anxiety. And the act of just calmly sitting and breathing, and rather than trying to get away from the anxiety, but actually sit with it and let it be there, that can be quite powerful, because it can diminish its effect, its power to be overwhelming, when you realize that it's part of that state of consciousness, something that's arising. It's your bodily mechanics, the construct of your mind, that is feeding this state of anxiety. And because if we had free will, why would we feel anxious about anything? It's not a pleasant feeling, okay? So therefore you would choose not to feel anxious. You would choose not to feel depressed, right? Yet these things happen to us, and they kind of, they go against the idea of free will. Like, if you had free will, you surely you would be able to override your emotions, right? See, then the argument changes to, well, you have free will, but emotions are like a non-negotiable part of that. And I don't think they are. I think like emotions are possibly an example. Free will equals control of emotions, says Darth Annihilus. That's the way I would look at it. If we had free will, you would have some control over your emotions.